Today we've got Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming. She's retiring after just one term in the Senate. So this creates a new power vacuum in this deep red state. Dems have virtually no chance of winning it. So we'll look at the state of Wyoming politics and take a stroll through some recent elections, and we'll see the last time Democrats had any success in this state. So let's get into it. Senator Cynthia Lummis won't seek re-election in 2026. And this one was not on my radar, but it doesn't really have any national implications. It's the number one or two reddest state in the US, but that doesn't mean there's not any internal Republican dynamics at stake. Because this state is so red, you might think super strong Trump-style Republicans would be dominating every level of this state. But over the past decade, there has been a divide between the more establishment wing and the new Trump wing. The Trump wing seems to have made some significant gains over the past few years, so we're going to see if that translates up into the US Senate. It's a similar dynamic in blue states where there's a battle between progressives and more establishment Democrats. So as far as Cynthia Lummis goes, I think she's a fairly under-the-radar senator from a low-population state. So she's in her early 70s now. She's been in Wyoming politics for decades, and she's going to be one and done after 6 years in the Senate. Now this seat, combined with an open seat for governor next year, there's a big list of potential candidates that could fill these voids. Now usually I like to focus more on the general election and which party might win, but because there's at least a 99% chance Republicans would win this seat, we've at least got to see what might happen in that Republican primary. So here we are on Wikipedia, and some of the potential candidates listed here are not the same ones we just saw on that Wyoming news article. Leadership in the state house and senate, those are potential candidates, but the two highest profile names are going to be right here. First, it's current governor Mark Gordon. Again, he's going to be term limited. He could end up making a smooth transition to the US Senate. We've seen him have sky-high popularity, so that might not be a bad decision. But I think the little bit more obvious candidate would probably be U.S. Rep. Harriet Hageman. You might remember her taking out Liz Cheney in that Republican primary a couple of elections ago. So a promotion to the U.S. Senate seems like a logical move. She's already established herself as being pro-Trump when she took down Cheney. So voters in this state are looking to continue that brand and move a little bit more away from the establishment. Then Hageman, I think, would be an easy frontrunner. And she might have already declared her intent to run by the time you watch this video. And unless there's something that's worked out behind the scenes between her, Mark Gordon, or one of those high-profile state Republicans, then I would expect her to enter this race. So there's not much else here. Lummis already had the endorsement of Donald Trump before she dropped out, and she had raised more than a couple $1,000,000. Even though it's extremely red territory, we could take a look at the other side, but there's not even a section here yet on Wikipedia. Dems have no bench here. They could pretty much put up anybody, and it would very likely still be a blowout. I think their best bet might just be to run an independent candidate instead of a Democrat. Now next year is more likely than not to be kind of a blue-leaning year, so the margin could be narrowed even in a red state like this. But let's move on here and see what we've got for some recent election results. We'll start here in 2020. This was Lummis's first and only win. Now, when I think of a landslide, this is what we're talking about. Lummis won by more than 45 points. She's into the 70s. The Democrat failed to muster even 27%. So there's really nothing to even do with this kind of a result. This wasn't a special election or some kind of a local county race. This is a high turnout statewide election. So it's hard to really look at the other side if it's not even going to be within a 15 or 20 point margin. So what about in the last presidential election? Well, Donald Trump won it with a similar margin. He's at 71.6, just under what Lummis put up. Harris at 25.8. Now, even though it's a dark red state, Democrats could potentially win two of these counties. The one in light red here is Albany County, but the one here that's clearly blue is Teton County. It's a very wealthy county, there's some resort areas, and it turns out it's a blue dot in a dark red state. But overall, this is a state where the GOP could pretty much run against a glass of water and come out with a landslide win. But because it is so red, have the Democrats had any kind of recent success here? I'd say not recently, but if you go back 20 years ago, they do have a win here. This is for governor. This is the re-election of incumbent Dave Friedenthal. And compared to what we just saw, this might look like a mistake. Every county is blue here. What's going on with that? Well, it was a little bit different time in politics. Plus, Friedenthal was not at all a bad candidate. He was a good fit for the state. And of course, going back that far, he's going to be a more conservative type of Democrat. There was also a blue wave national environment. But the margin here is still extremely impressive. He won by 40%. He's at 70. It's basically the exact inverse of what we just saw for the Republicans. So that is fascinating stuff. But when Friedenthal won his first race in 2002, it was much, much closer. Here he was just under 50%, and he won by about 2 points. That goes to show you once you get your foot in the door, 4 years later, anything could happen and you could win in a landslide. So it's been a while since the Dems had any success here. But what about in the US Senate? When's the last time they won a race here? Well, for that, it's going to be 1970. So 5.5 decades ago, the Dems won by double digits. Now, every race has different dynamics, but obviously this is so far in the past, it doesn't have a lot of reflection on current politics. But if we go past 1970, there was actually an extremely close race in this state. That was in 1988. It was still a while ago, but the incumbent Republican only won by less than 1%. So it's not like Democrats have had no shot here for the past 100 years. They've won some races in certain environments when they have the right candidates, and Republicans might be facing some headwinds. But to show you the current context, in the most recent Senate election here in 24, incumbent John Barrasso won by more than 50 points. He's at 75%. That's a little bit more than what Trump got. But even Barrasso still clearly lost Teton County. So I almost never say anything is a guarantee, but I'd say Republicans pretty much have this next Senate election totally in the bag. But if Harriet Hageman runs in the U.S. Senate, then there'll be an opening in the at-large district in the U.S. House. And if you think the Democrats haven't been competitive here in a federal election in many decades, well, you'd be wrong. Again, back in 2006, that was the year that the Democrat easily won for governor. But in the U.S. House, Barbara Cuban, who was an incumbent Republican, she also won by less than 1%. She's at 48.3. That was also a pretty good wave year for the Dems. Now, I still wouldn't expect it to be this close in 26 for the Dems, even if they have a great night. But it shows you that you can't take everything completely for granted, even just 20 years ago. But even less than 20 years ago, 2 years later, in 2008, again, another pretty good year for the Dems. Now we're back to Cynthia Lummis when she won her first term in the U.S. House. She won it decisively, but it was by single digits. Again, this is kind of a different time in politics. But even though this has been a really red state for president for many decades, there's a few specific instances where Dems have pulled out a win for state politics, or where they've come kind of close for federal office. So that's kind of where we're at for the status of Wyoming politics and the history of recent elections for both sides. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about Wyoming politics? Do you think it's going to keep getting more Trump friendly, or is the establishment going to make a comeback? Who's going to be the nominee for U.S. Senate? Is it easily going to be Harriet Hageman? And what about the drought for the Dems? How competitive do you think they can make it? Do you think they should just run an independent candidate instead of a Democrat? Let me know what you think down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.